Mr. Vargas, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You will have 15 minutes to answer all 5 questions, to include a 1-minute introduction and a 30-second close. Please introduce yourself.
My name is René Vargas. I was born and raised in El Paso. I left for about 20 years to go to college and then law school. And then I had my own private practice in Austin, Texas, practicing primarily criminal defense. I decided I got engaged, and my wife's here in the audience, got engaged and decided to move back to El Paso to be closer to family and to make an impact on the community, which I have already begun to do working at the Public Defender's Office. I see this as just another opportunity to give back to the community along with the work I do at the Public Defender's Office. And I feel like having a strong public education system is key in having clients like the ones I deal with avoid a life of crime, a life of misfortune. A lot of times when I have these clients that are in this situation, I feel like we've let them down as a society, as a community, and if they had stronger schools to fall back on, then perhaps they could avoid some of these pitfalls.
Very good. Question number 1 pertains to charters. The El Paso ISD Board of Trustees has publicly taken an anti-charter position. What is your position on charters, and what will you do to protect EPISD's community schools?
Well, I'll do everything possible to protect us from charters. That's largely a reason why I decided to enter this race. Is I've been reading a lot over the past several years about how charters are moving in on public education, and frankly, from a personal standpoint, I'm dubious whenever the words free market and market forces are entering public life and entering public institutions such as healthcare and now education. I feel like, frankly, I'm coming from a technically conservative standpoint because I feel like public education is fine the way it is. In other words, fine with the institutions, with school districts, and not the privatization. And I think charter schools are a dangerous slope and a slippery slope towards privatization, which I feel can be a race to the bottom. If you inject the profit motive into education, I feel that's dangerous because you know, then communities with less money are left in a rut. Then I feel that if a school is driven by the profit motive, then they may do things to eliminate or minimize the amount of difficult students that they deal with in order to be able to advertise, look how great our students are. And I think there's another problem in that, you know, in a perfect market, the consumer is driven by actual information and facts and is able to make a actual learned and informed decision. And I feel like with schools, a lot of times that's not happening, and they make it on reputation. And I've said before, you know, who doesn't want to send their children to the good school on the rich side of town? But again, that's dangerous because a lot of that's based on reputation evidence, on reputation, and not actual, you know, actual facts when it comes to the consumer making that decision. And then again, in a lot of poor, underserved communities, they don't have access to even that same information, and they can just be stuck in the same rut and be ignored. And I feel like we should be strengthening those communities and strengthening those schools rather than running away from them.
Thank you. The next question pertains to District of Innovation. The Texas Education Agency's designation of District of Innovation allows El Paso ISD to establish student-teacher ratios which are larger than the state's recommendation, employ classroom personnel who are not certified teachers, pay teachers less than the state pay scale, and eliminates many oversight allowances, which eliminates transparency with the use of taxpayer dollars, particularly when we're discussing purchasing. If you are elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, will you support the renewal of EPISD's District of Innovation designation? Why or why not?
Certainly I'm against everything that you just mentioned. The lack of transparency, innovation, I think is just a buzzword to describe something else that's happening that's more insidious, which is closed-door meetings, closed-door decisions, opaqueness when it comes to financial decisions, and the fact that, like I said, I think I'm coming from this from a very conservative viewpoint, even despite the fact that I'm progressive on most issues, because I feel that the way schools have been run is fine. I just feel that innovation is a buzzword for taking power away from teachers, which will ultimately affect students. Innovation is a way to describe getting rid of unions, getting rid of teachers' power, getting rid of their collective bargaining in order for the powers that need to make any decision regarding teachers. And I feel when you affect teachers in a bad way, you affect students in a bad way. Certainly they're where the rubber hits the road. And again, when it comes to innovation and the use of technology, I think that can be used sparingly. What I remember about school aren't the facilities, we got this brand new TV that we really enjoyed. I remember my teachers. And I feel like if we focus on teachers and pay them what they're worth, like the professionals that they are, and we value them, then a good teacher can do better with a chalkboard and nothing else than a bad teacher or an underfunded teacher with all the technology and gizmos in the world. So certainly, whenever they say innovation, I want to know what that actually means, innovation. And I'm against there being, like I said, opaqueness. I think studies have proven that the smaller class size, the better. So I would certainly be against all the things you mentioned.
Thank you. The next question pertains to governance. One of the most important responsibilities of a school board trustee is selecting an effective superintendent and evaluating her or his process and progress. If elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, what is one of the largest student outcome gaps and which student outcome goal would you recommend the board adopt for the purposes of ensuring improved student outcomes and superintendent monitoring?
Superintendent monitoring, I think, is one of the main functions of a school district, of a well-functioning school district. I believe that a superintendent and the school board should work together and cooperate in as much as possible. However, I see the relationship between the school board and the superintendent much like the role that Congress is supposed to play with the president. In other words, work together towards a common goal. However, when those boundaries are overstepped or when the superintendent's goals or initiatives are maybe not aligned with what's best for students and teachers and maybe in line with some other focus, and I think that's when the school board needs to step in as a check. As far as a gap that needs to be closed, that's certainly important, and that's important for the people in my district so that the kids that go to Austin High School, the kids that go to all the elementary schools, that they have the same opportunities as anybody else in the city. I think that a large focus needs to be placed on college readiness, but I think as educators and as a school district, we need to realize that not all kids are going to go to college, and I think that there's good ways and good programs in place to make sure that they can find success, even if they're not the most academically, the high academic achievers. I think that school districts and schools should focus on helping students become productive adults, help them to find their way in life, and whatever achievement gaps exist, for whatever reasons, socioeconomics, region, I think that it's important for the school district and schools to step in and sort of catch those kids that fall through the cracks. And there's certainly measures and milestones and sort of benchmarks that we can use to measure that success. And I think I'd be focusing on that, especially focused on the schools in my district, making sure that they're achieving as much as they can and that if enough resources are allocated to ensure academic success and life success.
Thank you. The next question pertains to teacher evaluations. El Paso ISD's T-test policy completely eliminates student scores from STAR and end-of-course exams, which are requirements in the state of Texas, from the teacher evaluation process. Do you support the continuation of this model? Why or why not?
The continuation of the model to
not include student scores on STAR or EOC as part of the teacher evaluation.
Well, I think scores are important. I think sometimes they're overemphasized, but I think there's a lack of other measures that we can focus on to measure success other than scores. And I think it's not important for me so much. The scores are in one sort of snapshot, and I think that can be dangerous. In looking at a snapshot, for instance, that would mean some teachers would avoid difficult students, difficult classes, because they wouldn't be able to achieve the same benchmark if they had another class of overachievers. So I believe that and I think in a large part some of the scoring does take this into account, that the score needs to be based on measures that are taken or improvement. In other words, you have a baseline of where your students are. How well has that teacher done to improve from that baseline? In other words, as a snapshot, it's not as good, but if you take a step back and see if that teacher is making some progress, then I think that's good, and I think that it's important to evaluate them and to have some sort of figure and an objective figure, but at the same time that needs to be measured because of the fact that a lot of the things that teachers are measured on are subjective, and I think the more that I learn about this, the more the different ways there are of measuring teachers, but I think scores are definitely something that can't be ignored. They need to be looked at but not overemphasized.
Thank you. The next question pertains to transformation zone grants. El Paso ISD's current Board of Trustees submitted a grant application to the Texas Education Agency, which awarded the district $5 million for 8 campuses, 4 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. The board also decided not to partner with a charter organization, leaving $5 million on the table. The newly elected trustees may amend the grant application and apply for the additional $5 million, which includes partnering with a charter organization. If elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, would you support a grant amendment for the additional $5 million? Why or why not?
As a general rule, I would say no, because charter schools are for business, and if they're lending that money, they're going to want something back in return. I doubt that they're acting out of full sense of magnanimity and giving back. However, a large problem with the charter schools is they don't fall under the umbrella of the school district, and they don't fall under the same guidelines and the same oversight. I'd have to look at it closely and see exactly what parts of the contract are, especially as a lawyer. I'd have to dig into the weeds and exactly what that partnership would mean. Like I said, as a general rule, I'm dubious because of that whenever a private entity that's for profit enters into the equation, because like I said, they're going to want that money returned in some way or fashion eventually, and history has proven that. So I'd be dubious about that. However, if there's a way to do it to ensure that it does fall in line with the mission and the goals of the school district, then I would consider it. But again, I would have to get into the weeds and the details of what that contract actually entailed. But I would say I would lean right now on the side of not doing that.
That was your last question, sir. You have 30 seconds to close.
Okay, well, I think it's appropriate that we're here in the McCall Center, named after Lola McCall and Mr. Marshall McCall, who was the first black post office employee in the city of El Paso, and more importantly, Mrs. McCall, who was the first principal of an all-black segregated school in El Paso, Douglas. I feel like part of the civil rights movement, or a large part of the civil rights movement for the black community, was getting education, which is counterintuitive, wanting to get in there to do some real work. But it was hand in hand, and I don't think we're done yet. I don't think we're done fighting for equality. I don't think we're done fighting for access of all children to the same high level of education. Like I said, that's very important from my perspective as a public defender. I feel like the more we spend on schools, the more we focus on schools, the less we can spend on prisons, and the less we can spend on jails and putting these kids, when they're adults, into these institutions.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joshua Acevedo, also a candidate for District 3. Mr. Acevedo, you will have 15 minutes, to include 1 minute to introduce yourself, 30 seconds to close, and 5 questions.
My name is Josh Acevedo. I'm running for EPISD Board of Trustees, District 3. I have 3 main points in my platform. The first one is competitive compensation and benefits for all employees at the district. I think it has taken too long to do this, so I have made it my top priority. My second priority is transparency and accountability. I think the district needs to be transparent and everybody needs to be accountable. And the bond is a big project, and I'm hoping that everything that was promised will happen. The 2016 resolution that was adopted by the board is important to me, so I'm hoping to make sure that that happens. And the third point is inclusivity. I feel the community is no longer at the table, So I want to bring the community back, and I want to do that through community meetings. There's big decisions being made by the district, and we're leaving the community out. So I am hoping to do that, and we could do that by using district resources, email, texting, social media, anything like that, to make sure that we are bringing in the public and hearing their voice before a big decision like a school closure is made. I am born and raised here in El Paso. I am an EPISD product, and I'm really proud of that. And I have 2 masters, one in political science, one in public administration, and I am currently doing my doctorate of education in educational leadership and administration.
Thank you. Question number 1 pertains to charters. The EPISD Board of Trustees has publicly taken an anti-charter position. What is your position on charters, and what will you do to protect EPISD's community schools?
Is this 3 minutes or?
You have 15 minutes to get all of it.
All of it, okay, perfect. I am completely against charter schools. One of my biggest points why I'm running is I feel that we have come to a crossroads, and we can make education feasible for some, or we can make education feasible for all. And that's the path that I want to take. I want to make education feasible for all, and charter schools do not do that. They leave students behind in the classroom. The students that are left behind are the ones that are going to be suffering because the money is taken away from the district. And the charters do not have any accountability. They're autonomous, and they get to pick who comes into the district, kick out whoever they want, pick who goes into the charter school, pick whoever they want, and I think that's completely wrong. The reason that charters are coming into it is because we're not funding education how we need to. I think education, if we funded it in another way and we made it equitable for all, we wouldn't be having these issues. But in the 70s, we had a Supreme Court decision that set the tone for what we're doing today, and that's why we have the funding that we have. So we have to deal with it, but charters are not the answer. And now the state is looking at bringing in new measurements for districts, and I think that's also the wrong way to do it. But at the same time, it's a catch-22 because we want more money in our schools, in our public schools. And the catch-22 is that we get measurements, and the schools that are doing well are going to continue to do well, and it's the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. So the rich schools are going to keep getting money that they don't need, and the other schools are going to suffer. How does that make sense? So we do not need charter schools, and we need better funding. I'm hoping, there's the federal, the state laws that need to change to make that happen, but the district shouldn't be allowing charter schools.
Thank you. The next question pertains to District of Innovation. The Texas Education Agency's designation of District of Innovation allows El Paso ISD to establish student-teacher ratios which are larger than the state's recommendations and requirements, employ classroom personnel who are not certified teachers, pay teachers less than the state pay scale, and eliminates many oversight allowances, which eliminates transparency with the use of taxpayer dollars to include purchasing. If you are elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, will you support the renewal of EPISD's District of Innovation designation? Why or why not?
I'm not sure the District of Innovation is really bringing any innovation to the district at all. I think it is leaving a lot of people out, and we're bringing in consultants, we're bringing in contracts, and that money could be used for other things. We have educators telling us what we want to do, and they are the ones in the classroom. Those are the people that are saying, we don't want bigger classroom sizes, we can barely handle the size that we have now, so why are we going to lose oversight? I don't think that as a board, we should be allowing to have less power for the board. We need to make sure that the district's accountable, and to lose that power, it makes no sense to me. The board has 3 functions. It's oversight of the superintendent, it's the budget, adopting the tax rate, and making policy, and making sure you pass good policy. This is not good policy, so I would be against it. We could invest that money in resources for our employees. We have our bus drivers, our librarians, our counselors, any administrative staff, of course, our teachers. And they're on the front lines, and we need to make sure that we invest there, and I think it'll make education a lot better for the students. We're educating the future, so while we're trying to say cool names and say it's a District of Innovation, it's taking us back to the past, and it just doesn't work out. The research is there, it says that it doesn't work out, so why are we accepting this?
Thank you. The next question pertains to governance. One of the most important responsibilities of a school board trustee is selecting an effective superintendent and evaluating her or his process and progress. If elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, what is one of the largest student outcome gaps, and which student outcome goal would you recommend the board adopt for the purposes of ensuring improved student outcomes and superintendent monitoring?
Well, this is a pretty loaded question. I think it has a few parts to it. I feel that the district needs to have feasible goals, and they need to be written down, and we need to make sure that they're held accountable to administration to make sure it's implemented. I think when selecting a superintendent, it's important that there's a vision there, and there's somebody that's going to be goal-oriented, that's going to come in and say, okay, how am I going to do this for the district? How am I going to be transparent? How am I going to be accountable to the board? I think it's their obligation to make sure that they have a voice, that the community has a voice, that the teachers have a voice, that the employees have a voice, and they could air any grievances that are happening or anything that they see that's going wrong with the district. So I think that's important. One big thing as far as goals, looking at the test scores and seeing what the state is doing with the letter grades A, B, C, D, F, I'm not sure that's the best thing to be doing either. So if we allow for one goal to be teacher compensation, employee compensation, I think a lot would change at the district. Make it their first priority. I feel that some of the board members have not made this a priority at all. I've been talking to people and they keep telling me, you know, we haven't had a raise, and they're telling me that we're not going to have a raise for many years, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't you be taking care of your employees if they're the ones that are educating the future? So I think that would be one goal that I would implement, because then outcomes would increase. I feel that outcomes would truly increase, and I don't know why we're not going in that direction.
For clarification, sir, that is what you would use for your superintendent monitoring?
Yes.
What would you use for ensuring student outcomes improve?
Ensuring student outcomes, sorry about that.
That's fine.
Ensuring student outcomes improving, I think looking at the reports and looking at the numbers that are coming in, I mean, I was at a board meeting a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the test scores that were coming in, and I thought those scores were a bit low, and they were kind of applauding them. I think there was something in the 20% that got commended, and I feel that we could do a lot more by not coming in with consultants and coming in with any of those people. I think you just give it to the people that are already in the district to inform what's happening, why these resources aren't being used, I'm not sure. But if we do that, I think the outcomes would improve.
Thank you. The next question pertains to teacher evaluations. El Paso ISD's T-test policy completely eliminates student scores from STAR and end-of-course exams, which are state requirements, as part of their teacher evaluation process. Do you support the continuation of this model? Why or why not?
So, I mean, I feel that the STAR is very flawed. I feel that we have had testing, standardized testing for many years, and we still haven't, I don't think it's the best indicator of seeing student outcomes. I think there's other better ways of doing it. So I would support to not put the STAR on evaluations for the teachers, because I feel that the whole system is not good. So why are we going to use those numbers? And then it puts the pressure on the teachers that they're teaching the test. And I know that we're not in that era anymore where we're teaching the test, but we really are. And there's that pressure to say, you know what, we're going to be doing this because then my job's going to be affected, and then the morale goes down, and there's stress on the teacher, and then the education level goes down in the classroom. So I wouldn't put that on their evaluation. I think there's other ways of doing it, but also listening to them is a good way of saying, you know, what do you want to be evaluated on, and seeing, you know, I want to be evaluated on my teaching, on how I come into the room and where my kids are, or what resources do you need to be a little bit better. I mean, sometimes it's not their fault. A lot of these teachers are making ends meet. They're getting a second job, a third job to make sure that happens. So if we are able to change that system, then I think their evaluations don't need the STAR. I mean, I would eliminate the STAR test completely. I mean, New Mexico eliminated the national test that they were taking, and I would do that in Texas, but I understand that politics in Texas are not going in that direction, but I hope they do in the near future. So I think it's good to not include that in the teacher evaluations.
Thank you. This is your last question. It pertains to transformation zone grants. El Paso ISD's current Board of Trustees submitted a grant application to the Texas Education Agency, which awarded the district $5 million for a transformation zone, which includes 4 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. The board also decided not to partner with a charter organization, leaving $5 million on the table. The newly elected trustees may amend the grant application and accept the additional $5 million, which includes partnering with the charter organization. If elected to serve on the El Paso ISD Board of Trustees, would you support a grant amendment for the additional $5 million? Why or why not?
I wouldn't. Why are we bringing people from charter schools into public education? It makes no sense. Whether it's $5 million or not, it's $5 million that are being used in the wrong way. That is such a horrible decision. And I believe that there are other experts that we could go to. I mean, we have experts at the university. I'm doing a doctorate of education, and these are the things that we're talking about in our research. There's evidence-based practices. Why are we not going and partnering with the university to do something like that? It's local, it's here, and they want that research. They want to publish it. Well, we need to take that out of academia and bring it into the community, and that's one way of doing it. And we save money. We don't even need the $5 million at that point. But there's also other experts that we're bringing, and I'm not sure those experts are doing very much. So why are we doing that? So yes, I would leave that $5 million. If they want to shred the $5 million, because then it doesn't go to charter people, then I'd be very happy with that.
Thank you, sir. You're in closing.
30 seconds. Yes. Well, as I said, you know, I'm EPISD, a product of EPISD, and I was raised by a single mother, and my mother placed a high value on my education. And the reason she did that is because it breeds opportunity, and that's the opportunity that I want to bring to the table. I am also somebody that understands policy, and there's bad policy, and there's good policy, and there's informed policy as well. And I want a good policy, informed policy to make sure that we are making the good decisions for the board, and I want to bring the community into it, and I want to bring the research. Nobody's talking about research, and I feel that I'm in a very unique position to bring that research into the community. How many times do you hear anybody in Congress or at the state level or local level say, well, you know, I read this article by PhD so-and-so, and they said evidence-based practices for education are this. You don't, and that's sad. And this is what they're doing, and we could do that and transform policy, transform the district, and really make it an innovative district, because it's not.